parents mocked me at my sister's engagement party, but they didn't know I'd actually owned the restaurant where they'd dinner, so I ordered my staff to immediately stop serving them and leave 50 guests without food. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am, 30 years old and finally ready to tell it. My name is Erica, and this is how my life changed forever when I was 13. Back then, we were what you'd call a normal family, just mom, dad, and me living in our cozy house on Maple Street. Dad worked in construction, and mom was a part-time bookkeeper. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Everything fell apart when Dad had his accident one minute. He was heading to work on a regular Tuesday morning. And the next, well, he was gone just like that, Mom. Fell apart. I mean, completely fell apart. She'd spend hours just staring at nothing. And I had to learn to take care of myself pretty quick. Erica, honey, she said to me one evening about 6 months after Dad died, I need to tell you something important. She was sitting at our kitchen table fidgeting with her coffee cup like she always did when she was nervous. I've met someone, his name is Robert, and he makes me happy again. You should have seen it coming. Really, the late night phone calls, her suddenly caring about her appearance again, the mysterious errands she had to run. But when she told me Robert would be moving in with us, along with his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah, it still felt like a punch to the gut. But Mom, I protested. It's only been 6 months since. Dad, I know, sweetie, she cut me off, her voice taking on that stern tone I'd started hearing more often. But life goes on Robert. He's a good man, and Sarah needs a mother figure. We can be a family again. A family, that's what she called it, when Robert moved. In 2 weeks later, bringing boxes of his stuff. And his daughter, who looked a tour house like it was some kind of fairy tale castle. Sarah was this tiny thing with blonde pigtails and big blue eyes. Exactly the kind of cute little girl my mom had always wanted. Look at her. Erica, Mom would say, watching Sarah color or play with her dolls. Isn't she precious? She needs so much love and attention. This age, yeah, she needed attention. And my mom was more than happy to give it all of it. Every last bit she had, which apparently left nothing for me. I watched as my mother transformed herself into the perfect stepmother for Sarah. While I became invisible the first time, I really understood how things would be was during dinner about a week after. They moved, and Robert's mother had come over this woman who would become the bane of my existence. She took one look at me and said, "Oh, what a big girl you are." Then she reached over and pinched my cheek so hard I wanted to scream. Such a pretty face, she co-ed her, fingers digging into my skin like claws. But, Robert, this house would be absolutely perfect if she didn't finish the sentence. But she didn't have to Esau the way she looked at me like I was a stain on her son's perfect new family portrait. That night, I found bruises on my cheeks where she'd pinched me. But when I tried to show Mom, she just shook, or her head life settled into a routine, but not one I was part of. Mom, Robert, and Sarah became this perfect little unit, always doing things together, going to the park, having movie nights, or just sitting around the dinner table laughing at Sarah's silly jokes. Meanwhile, I got shipped off to Mom's friend Janet's house more and more often. Erica, honey, Mom would say, not quite meeting my eyes. Janet needs help. With little Emily today, you don't mind. Do you so off I'd go to Janet's house where at least someone seemed happy to see me? Emily was 4 and absolutely adorable with these bouncy curls and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room she'd run tome. Screaming ARI the moment I walked through the door playing with Emily was actually the highlight of my days. We'd build blanket forts, have tea parties with her stuffed animals, or read stories where I do all the silly voices Janet would bring us. Snacks and join in, sometimes asking about school, and actually listening to my answers. It felt normal, like family should feel back at home. It was a different story. Robert's mother, Mrs. Henderson, had practically moved in, or at least it felt that way. Was always there, rearranging furniture, criticizing the curtains, suggesting new paint colors, and Mom just jumped to make every change. She suggested these walls should be eggshell, not cream, she'd declare. And next thing you know, Mom would be at the hardware store, picking out paint samples the living room furniture needs to be, rearranged for better funu. She'd insist, and Mom would spend all weekend moving heavy furniture around, but her favorite hobby was still tormenting me. She'd grab my cheeks between her bony fingers, squeezing until I thought my skin would burst, still not. Holding your fork properly, I see she'd say, pinching harder, such poor table manners. Your mother really should have taught you better, or she'd catch me reading on the couch. Look at her slouching like that. No wonder she's such terrible posture pinch. You'll never catch my Sarah sitting like that. Robert was just as bad. But in his own way, if I accidentally knocked over a glass or dropped a plate while doing dishes, he'd explode. Do you know how much that cost? He'd yell, his face turning red. Of course. You don't. You've never earned $1 in your life, have you? Just a freeloader, living off my hard work, I'm sorry. I'd mumble, trying to clean up. Whatever I'd broken. Sorry, doesn't. Replace things, does it? He continue. You eat my food, wear clothes, I pay. For live in my house, and what do you contribute? Nothing, just break things and make messes each time something like this happened. I'd look to Mom hoping she'd say something, anything, but she'd just busy herself cleaning or fussing with. Sarah pretending not to hear the day it turned. 16. I made a decision I wasn't going to be Robert's freeloader anymore. I got up early that morning and walked around the neighborhood, putting up flyers I'd made offering dog walking services by afternoon. I had 3 clients. Lined up, you want to walk dogs, Mrs. Peterson, from 2 streets over, asked when I knocked on her door. What about all that schoolwork you teenagers have? These days I can manage both. I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt I get good grades. And I'm very responsible with animals. She looked skeptical, but handed over her golden retriever's leash anyway, all right? Latungavita Trimax needs a walk every day after school, at 10 per walk. That was just the beginning. Soon I was walking 5 different and dogs, watching the Martinez twins on weekends, and helping old Mr. Cooper with his grocery shopping. Janet officially hired me as Emily's after school nanny, which felt weird since I've been watching her for free all this time. Anyway, I saved every dollar. Didn't spend a cent on candy or movies or any of the things other kids my age bought after 3 months. I had enough to buy what I'd been dreaming of, a smartphone. Nothing fancy, just a basic model on sale, but it was mine the day I brought it home. I couldn't stop smiling. I had something that was just mine, that nobody could say they'd paid for. I was setting up the phone in my room when Sarah barged in without knocking. As usual, what's that? She demanded. Pointing at my phone, she was 9 now and had gotten into the habit of wanting everything she saw. It's my new phone, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I bought it with money from my jobs. Sarah's eyes went wide, but I want a phone. Daddy, before I could stop her, she was running downstairs, screaming for Robert. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs and my stomach dropped. What's wrong, princess? He asked from my doorway. Erica has a phone and I want it. Sarah whined, pointing at me accusingly. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. Without a word. Not one single word. Robert walked over, grabbed the phone right out of my hands, and gave it to Sarah. Daddy's got you covered, sweetheart, he said to her, completely ignoring me. I was so angry I could barely see straight the next day at school. I told my English teacher, Mrs. Collins, everything about the phone, about Robert's constant belittling, about Mom's indifference. She listened quietly, then took me to the principal's office. By that afternoon, Mom was called in. I wasn't in the meeting, but I heard raised voices when Mom came out. Her face was red with anger, but she had my phone in her hand. She thrust it at me without looking at me. Here, she said through clenched teeth, I hope you're happy now. That night, after Sarah had cried for hours about losing her phone, Mom came to my room. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you go behind our backs like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was? You're nothing but a traitor. That was the last thing she said to me for 2 weeks, she and Robert. Both pretended it didn't exist, walking past me like I was invisible, talking around me like I wasn't there. Even at dinner, they pass dishes right past me without acknowledging my presence. 2 years passed, in pretty much the same way me working my jobs. Trying to keep my head down at home and focusing on school, I threw myself into my studies, knowing education was my ticket out. When senior year came around, I applied to every scholarship I could find the day the letter arrived from State College. I nearly threw up from nervousness. I waited until I was alone in my room, tupin it, my hands shaking, so bad I could barely tear the envelope. Dear Miss Thompson, we are pleased to inform you I had to read it 3 times before it sank in full scholarship. They were giving me a full scholarship. I'd done it. I was going to college. And I wouldn't have to beg Robert for a dime like an idiot. I thought maybe this would make them proud. Maybe this would finally make Mom see me again. I waited until dinner that night when everyone was sitting around the table. Mom, Robert, I have some good news. I started my heart pounding. I got accepted to state college. What Robert's for clattered against his plate. You applied to college without telling me. Who do you think you are, living in my house, eating my food, and making decisions like this behind my back? But it's a full scholarship. I tried to explain you won't have to pay anything. Damn right. I wouldn't pay anything? He spat not a single cent for an ungrateful freeloader like you, always sneaking around, always plotting. Something. I looked at Mom desperately. She was staring at her plate, pushing food around with her fork. Mom, I pleaded. Please say something. Why aren't you standing up for me? She finally looked up, but her eyes were cold. Why should I? You've never shown any respect for this family. You've never accepted. Robert, all you've done is try to destroy my marriage from day one. Respect I felt. Something snapped inside me. All the years of hurt and anger came pouring out. Respect him. Hyun's a bully and a terrible person. There's nothing to respect. The slap came out of nowhere. 1 second I was standing there shaking with anger. The next, my cheek was stinging. And Mom was standing in front of me, her hands still raised. Get out, she whispered. Then louder. Get out of my house. It touched my cheek where she'd hit me, feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. I ran upstairs in a daze, grabbing my backpack and stuffing it with whatever clothes I could reach, my phone, my school documents, the little bit of cash I had saved. Everything else would have to stay. I could hear Sarah lowing downstairs, Robert yelling, but it all seemed far away. 10 minutes later, I was standing on Jenny's front porch. Jenny from my biology class, the only person I could think to call when she opened the door, and saw my face, saw the backpack, and the tears I hadn't even realized were falling. She didn't ask any questions. She just pulled me inside and hugged me. I was sitting in Jenny's kitchen, stressed about how I'd manage college while being essentially homeless, when her Aunt Maria walked. And so you're the girl Jenny's been telling me about, she said, looking me up and down. Need a job. Turned out Maria owned this little Italian restaurant downtown, and she had an empty studio apartment above it. Before I knew what was happening, she was offering me both half rent-free meals, flexible hours around your classes, she said, like it was no big deal. The apartment needs some work, but it's clean and safe. I started as a waitress, learning everything I could about the business. Maria was tough but fair, teaching me things they'd never cover in my business classes at college. Watch how that table keeps sending food back. She'd say that's why we document every complaint, every compliment. Details matter in this business. The apartment was tiny, barely room for a bed, and a mini fridge. But it was mine. No Roberty yelling about freeloaders, no Sarah barging in without knocking, no Mrs. Henderson's critical eyes, just my own space where I could study, sleep, and finally breathe. By my senior year, Mariah had promoted me to administrator. I graduated with my business degree on a Saturday and was back at work Monday morning, now handling schedules, inventory, and staff management. You've got a gift for this, Maria told me 2 years later, after I'd worked my way up to managers. She was sitting in her office, looking tired but satisfied. Jenny tells me you two have been talking about partnership. I shifted nervously in my chair. We've discussed it, but good. She cut me off because I'm retiring restaurants, going to Jenny, but she needs someone who knows this business inside and out. Someone like you. My heart nearly stopped. Are you saying? I'm saying you two should run this place together, equal partners. You've got the experience. She's got the passion. Could be a powerful combination. Jenny and I stayed up all night talking it through. I had savings, every penny I could spare from the last few years, and she had ideas for modernizing the menu and expanding the business. We could do this, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. Really do this. Erica make I to her own. So we did. I invested everything I had, and we turned Maria's traditional Italian restaurant into something uniquely ours. For years after that, we opened our second location across town, sometimes walking through our restaurants, watching everything run smoothly. I'd think about my family. 11 years had passed since that night. Mom slapped me and threw me out. They were still in the city. I knew that much from occasional glimpses of Sarah's social media posts. But we lived in different worlds. Now one day, Jenny and I were in our office above of the downtown location, surrounded by spreadsheets and expansion plans when we heard the party. Arriving downstairs sounds like the engagement party here. Jenny said, glancing. At the booking schedule, 50 people should be a good night. We had this tradition, something we started when we first took over the restaurant. We'd go out and talk to customers, get their feedback, make them feel special. It was one of the things that set us apart from other places. I'll go check on them, eyes-eyed slipping on my branded blazer and pinning my name badge to it. You finish up with those vendor contracts. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses got louder as I headed downstairs. A big party. Like this could mean repeat business, maybe even more event bookings. I straightened my badge and put on my best professional smile. Then I saw them. My mother was sitting at the head table, her hair grayer than I remembered, but styled perfectly as always. Robert was next to her somehow, looking both older and exactly the same. And Sarah was in a sparkly dress holding hands with a guy in an expensive suit. My sister's engagement party for a second. I thought about turning around, but before I could move, Mom's eyes met mine, and I saw the recognition. Hit well, look who it is. She announced, loudly making heads turn our waitress. For the evening, Robert's face twisted into that familiar sneer, 30 years old and still serving tables. Can't say I'm surprised. I opened my mouth to speak, but Mom cut me off. I always knew you'd end up like this, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Look at your sister, college graduate economist, getting married to a wonderful man and you still wearing a name tag and taking orders. Sarah giggled, squeezing her fiancés, and maybe she'll do our dishes tonight. Right, Daddy, show us her special skills. The floors, too. Robert stood up, swaying slightly. He must have been drinking. In fact, Letton give her something to clean up. Right now, it happened so fast, he grabbed a plate of salad from the table and hurled it to the floor. The crash made everyone jump. I felt a sharp sting in my cheek and reached up to touch it. My fingers came away red. Oops. Robert smirked, staring at the blood trickling down my face. Better get a mop, waitress. My blood was boiling as I stood there, feeling it trickle down my cheek. 11 years of hurt and anger were bubbling up, and I was ready to unleash everything I'd ever wanted to say to them. But before I could open my mouth, I heard Jennick's voice cut through the tension. I believe this situation requires immediate attention, she said, walking up with the calm authority she'd learned from her Aunt Maria. She was holding our service agreement bound in leather. With our restaurant's gold-embossed logo, Jenny cleared her throat and addressed the room according to our service agreements, Action 3. 2. Any customers who verbally abuse or physically harm our staff? Or ownership. She paused meaningfully, gesturing toward me. Week be immediately removed from the premises. Ownership. Mom's mouth fell open. What are you talking about? Oh, didn't you know? Jenny's smile was razor sharp. You're talking to Erica Thompson, co-owner of this establishment, and 3 others across the city. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the color drain from me mother's face as she looked around. The restaurant really looked. At the framed reviews on the walls, the elegant decor, the sophisticated clientele, all the success she'd never bothered to learn about. That's impossible, Robert buttered, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. Furthermore, Jenny continued, in cases of assault, we're served the right to terminate service. Immediately without refund, she turned tome Erica, your call. I straightened my blazer, wiped the blood from my cheek with my sleeve, and found my voice clear. The tables I commanded our staff. All 50 guests need to leave. Now the waiter sprang into action, efficiently removing plates and glasses. That's when I heard the familiar screech, Mrs. Henderson, Robert's mother clutching her plate. Of pasta like it was solid gold, you can do this, she shrieked. Exactly the same way she used to screech about my table manners while pinching my cheeks. This is my son's daughter's engagement party one. Of our waiters, Miguel tried to take her plate, but she yanked it back, sending. Sauce flying, help. Help, they're attacking me. Robert lurched forward, his face purple with rage. Get your hands off my mother, he started toward me, fist clenched. But our security team was faster. 2 guards stepped between us, while a third announced that the police were already on their way. Sarah had dissolved into tears. Her perfect engagement party ruined Mom. Do something, she wailed. But Mom just stood there, mascara running down her face, looking lost. The woman who'd once slapped me and thrown me out of my home now couldn't even meet my ayas. The next 30 minutes were chaos. The police arrived first, taking statements from multiple witnesses who'd recorded everything on their phones. Robert was handcuffed and let out, still shouting threats. The ambulance arrived next. An paramedic cleaned and bandaged the couton. My face while guests filed out, whispering among themselves. My phone rang 3 days after the incident. Unknown number. Erica Mom's voice was softer than it had been at the restaurant, almost pleading, "Please don't hang up." I waited, saying nothing. "Look about Robert. The police are pressing charges. You need to drop them. He could lose his job over this." "No," I said simply, and hung up within hours. The social media attacks began. Mom's first post was long and dramatic, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive restaurant owner who'd ruined her precious daughter's engagement party. The comments filled with sympathy for her, people vowing never to visit our restaurants. Then Sarah joined in writing about her psychotic stepsister who couldn't stand to see her little sister happy. The post spread quickly through local community groups. Jenny found mastering at my phone, reading the lies. "You know, we have it all on video, right? The security system Maria installed years ago, it automatically zooms in and records audio when it detects raised voices or aggressive movements." The footage was crystal clear. You could hear every word. Robert's threats, Mom's insults, the crash of the plate. Mrs. Henderson screaming. I posted it in the comments of Mom's rant with a simple message: "Here's what actually happened." The video exploded overnight. Other guests from the party started posting their phone recordings too. Someone had captured the perfect angle of Miguel trying to clear Mrs. Henderson's plate, her face contorted with rage, pasta sauce flying everywhere, his professional, never wavering. That clip alone got millions of views. Restaurant drama started trending locally, then nationally. Food blogs picked up the story. Family crashes engagement party at daughter's own restaurant made headlines. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of family estrangement and toxic parents. The consequences came swiftly. Robert's company, already embarrassed by his arrest, couldn't ignore the viral video of him assaulting his stepdaughter at her own business. They quietly moved him to a lower position. The court fined him heavily for assault and property damage. Mom tried damage control, deleting her posts, but screenshots lived forever. Sarah's wedding venue canceled on her not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Mrs. Henderson became a meme, the pasta lady. Her screeching face splashed across social media, watching the view count climb on that security footage. I remembered something I used to tell myself in the dark days after Mom kicked me out someday. Things would be different. Someday I'd have the chance to reconcile with my family. Someday they'd realize what they'd done and try to make it right. But seeing them in my restaurant that night, watching them try to humiliate me, even after all their success, even after all these years, I finally understood some things can't be fixed, some bridges aren't meant to be. Rebuilt the video, ended up being good for business. But that wasn't why I kept it pinned to my profile. I kept it there as a reminder, both for myself and for others, that sometimes the happy ending isn't about forgiveness or reunion. Sometimes it's about accepting that it's okay to walk away and never look back.